Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is September the 17th, 2024. It has been 3,886 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 209 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 206 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 43 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and the RAM map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south, and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission: the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain that United States military aid to Ukraine will likely end on September 30th, 2024, beyond already committed deliveries and funding. 2. In our assessment, the loss of assistance from the United States has the potential to be catastrophic for the Ukrainian armed forces. 3. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 4. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 5. The continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have caused critical damage, creating an environment where an accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants is possible. 6. The unwillingness of the Biden administration to permit Ukraine to use provided weapons for strikes more than 40 kilometers from the 1991 state border of Russia has caused geopolitical damage, with European leaders discussing making an independent decision. 7. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States is a complete failure that has only encouraged Russia to escalate hybrid and kinetic warfare actions against the NATO alliance and Ukraine's allies and their economic interests. 8. The failed policies of the NATO alliance are increasing the probability of nuclear proliferation and an expansion of the Russia-Ukraine war into the European continent. 9. While Russian forces continue to make gains, we assess that it will be difficult to maintain the current operational tempo due to unsustainable losses of heavy equipment and personnel. 10. We maintain the Kursk counter-invasion is strategically sound. 11. Autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October 1st is unrealistic and very unlikely. 12. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. 13. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. Today, we start with the action report summary. On Monday, Russia carried out 157 discrete assaults, and through September 16th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks dropped to 144. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, has restarted its reports on Russian airstrikes and artillery activity. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 84 airstrikes, dropping 127 bombs, and Russian ground units carried out approximately 4,000 fire missions. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,062 square kilometers, with another 331.5 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,393.5 square kilometers. There are two bridges. The first, from Uspenovka to Kucherov, is 74.8 kilometers wide, and the second, at Novy Put, has expanded to 22 kilometers. The main bridge is up to 27 kilometers in depth, and the new one at Novy Put is up to 5.5 kilometers. Ukraine controls 83 hamlets, villages and settlements, including important infrastructure facilities such as the Sudzha gas metering facility. Of those, 28 are under administrative control of the provisional government. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in northeastern Ukraine. There's a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. We begin in the Kursk region of Russia, in the Glushkovo area of operation, or AO, where Ukrainian forces made marginal gains. Multiple Russian sources reported that Ukrainian troops breached the border at Krasnooktябрьsky and were attempting to advance in the direction of Volfina. Fighting continued in Veselaya, where the Ukrainian air forces provided close air support. North of Medvezhye, a Russian convoy, including a truck carrying ammunition, was ambushed as it tried to advance to the railroad grade. Because of the newly verified Russian advances in the Korenevo AO, more on that in a minute, we are no longer tracking the area of the Glushkovsky salient. As long as Russia holds Korenevo and the road south to the Ukrainian border, Russian troops have an alternative supply line. In the Korenevo AO, Russian state media released a report showing some areas that the Kremlin claimed were recaptured by Russian troops. The video was heavily edited, with multiple sections misattributed to other locations. Our analyst team spent over 3 hours tracking down the locations in the video. Areas west of Gordievka and Byakhovo were shown. In the case of Byakhovo, the video clip from the west of the village showed an area in Korenevo, misattributing it as in Byakhovo. A railroad crossing in the video, where a Russian infantry mobility vehicle became stuck, was not located in the Korenevo AO. The video also showed fighting north of Внезапное and the aftermath of fighting north of Apanasovka, where a BDRM-2 armored personnel carrier and civilian dump truck were destroyed. If you're looking at the map right now, you're probably wondering why so much area was moved to Russian control if all of the geolocations were west of the claimed captures. A satellite image from Sentinel-2LA, east of Viktorovka, showed a burn scar consistent with an attack by a Ukrainian Dragon drone. The image with additional information is in today's situation report, and there is more information on how to become a subscriber in the podcast description. Based on the Russian state media video, taking into consideration the deception in the editing and the route they took, and the confirmation of Russian positions east of Viktorovka, we coded Viktorovka, Внезапное, Apanasovka, Vishnevka and the Gaponovo train station as under Russian control. Additionally, we moved Gordievka and Uspenovka into the grey area due to the claim by the Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, that Uspenovka was captured. At the same time, Russian mercenary blogger Rybar advised caution, as there had not been visual confirmation. Armored claimed fighting was ongoing in the area of Viktorovka and Byakhovo. Fighting continued on the western edge of Lyubimovka, where video showed Russian forces continued to suffer significant losses. All of the attacks have come from the west, indicating that Russian troops no longer hold the forested area northwest of the settlement. Russian troops entered Obukhovka, that's the one near Korenevo, from the north, but were forced to retreat. Armored claimed without evidence that fighting was ongoing in Pokrovsky. Remember last week when I told you that Russian troops in Crimea were at risk of encirclement? Russian propagandist R.V. Voyenkory and Ukrainian source Deep State reported that Russian troops in Crimea are in a full encirclement. Ukrainian forces captured Kalinov and were able to advance east from Zhuravli, connecting on the western edge of Sheptuchovka. The Crimea-Sheptuchovka road has been under Ukrainian fire control for weeks. Russian sources claim that the garrison at Crimea is part of a naval infantry unit, and the 810th Brigade has been operating in the area. We believe that Ukrainian forces will maintain the encirclement and use attrition to wear the Russian garrison down. In the Sudzha AO, Armad claimed fighting was ongoing in the areas of Nikolaevo-Daryina and Daryina. Russian propagandists claimed Daryina was captured, which was all but dismissed by semi-reliable Russian sources. Video showing a Russian Lancet drone being intercepted revealed that Russia was shelling civilian areas on the western edge of Sudzha. Ukrainian soldier Artem Karyakin wrote about the situation in Sudzha and his interactions with the population living under occupation. All these lunatics, who never liked Putin and fed conscripts because they were young and hungry, it's a shame, are doomed anyway. There will be little left of their houses, and they say so themselves. There are no fools there. They know the methods of their own Russian army very well, and they complain that there will be nothing left of Sudzha. And every day there are a couple of houses gone. Before we start the theater-wide update for the Kursk region, a quick update from the Beltisa AO and the Sumy Oblast of Ukraine. Russian forces occupied the eastern part of Barki, capturing the settlement. Fighting was reported in the area of Plekhovo, with Russian troops trying to push Ukrainian forces west of the Psel River. In the Sumy Oblast, Russian Shahed 136 one-way drones targeted electrical infrastructure, striking up to 10 locations. Artem Kobzar, the acting mayor of Sumy, reported extensive damage across the city. The power utility, Sumy Oblenergo, reported that 281,000 customers in Sumy, Konotop and Ohtyrka were without power. In the city of Sumy, water pressure was reduced due to the lack of power. No injuries were reported. In theater-wide developments, the Kremlin condemned Ukraine's request for the International Committee of the Red Cross and the United Nations to provide humanitarian aid assistance in occupied Kursk Oblast. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters, quote, "This is essentially a provocative action, and we expect a sober assessment of such provocative statements." Peskov called for both international organizations to reject the request. Kyiv shot back, with Georgy Tikhy, the spokesperson for Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, writing on Twitter, also known as X, quote, "The Kremlin's reaction to Ukraine's offer for the UN and ICRC to join humanitarian efforts in the Kursk region shows Russia's disregard for its own people and their humanitarian needs, as well as fear of allowing international observers to see the real situation." The Ukrainian 225th Brigade captured a Russian soldier with the 234th Air Assault Regiment. The soldier claimed he was wounded in action near Robotine in the Zaporizhia Oblast of Ukraine and was sent to the Kursk Oblast for rehabilitation. He claims he was reactivated while at rehab and trained to be a drone operator. The acting governor of the Russian-controlled Kursk Oblast, Alexei Smirnov, announced 2 new mandatory civilian evacuation zones in the Khamutovka and Rylsk districts, impacting over 1,100 square kilometers to the border of the Bryansk Oblast. It's unclear why the evacuation order was given, as both regions are over 20 kilometers away from the closest known fighting.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com@malcontentnews.
It's time to talk about my home, Ukraine. Beginning in the Kharkiv Oblast in the Lipsy-Vovchansk, the remaining stragglers of the Russian garrison surrounded at the machine aggregate plant in Vovchansk were able to withdraw, with Ukrainian forces occupying the remains of the facility. Russian artillery units started striking the area. In northern Vovchansk, when you got to go, you got to go, and a Russian soldier had to go. A Ukrainian drone watched as he walked to an outhouse in an open field to be alone with his thoughts. Shortly after sitting for some quality thinking time, a first-person view one-way drone made it the aftermath of Taco Tuesday, eliminating the outhouse and the Russian soldier. And yes, we link to that video too. In the Kupiansk, Ukrainian forces made additional advances in Sinkivka and cleared Russian defensive positions west of the village in the forested area near Lake Liman. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Novoosinovo from occupied Pischane failed, as did attempts to advance in the direction of Lozova. At Pischane, Russian forces are 3 kilometers from the Oskil River, and the risk of the Ukrainian defensive lines east of the river being cut in half is increasing. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of occupied Svatovo, fighting was limited to a Russian attempt to advance in the direction of Druzhelyubivka, which was unsuccessful. West of Kremenna, fighting continued in Makiyivka and east of Nevske and Novosadove. There was no change in the situation. GSAFU reported there was positional fighting in the Serebryansky forest. Next up, the Donbass, where we start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Beginning in the Siverskoye, the operational tempo slowed. Fighting continued northeast and southeast of Bilogorivka. Russian forces tried to advance in the direction of Ivanodaryivka and probed Ukrainian defenses at Pereyizne. In the Kostiantynivka, the situation deteriorated. While Ukrainian forces continued to hold their defensive lines along the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal in Kalinivka and the canal district of Chasiv Yar, Russian forces were able to advance from northern Klishchiivka, cross the canal up to 1,000 meters in depth, and raise their flag east of Stupochki. This is approximately the same location private military company Wagner Group advanced to in the spring of 2023 during the Bakhmut offensive. East of occupied Bakhmut, a video showed the Ukrainian air forces bombing Russian warehouses in Dolomitne. In the Toretsk-New York AO, Ukrainian forces continued to hold their defensive lines. Fighting continued in Druzhba, eastern Toretsk, and southwestern Zalizne. Russian attempts to advance into Nelipivka continued to be unsuccessful. In occupied Gurlivka, a video showed a drone-directed HIMARS attack on a Russian position, eliminating several soldiers. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, intense fighting continued in the Pokrovsk AO. Ukrainian forces continued to hold the north flank, as well as holding back Russian advances in northern Hrodivka and at Krasny Yar. Blocked for weeks on the northern edge of Novohrodivka, Russian forces appear to be attempting to flank the Ukrainian forces at the mine complex, advancing west to the southern edge of Lysivka. Fighting continued in Marinivka and Mikhailivka, where Russian forces continued to be held back from advancing towards Selidova. Intense fighting also continued in the Kurakhove AO. Fighting continued in Ukrainsk, with Russian forces attempting to advance in the direction of Tsukurine. Russian claims that Zhelanne Persha was captured were false, although Russian troops have reached the northern edge of the village. GSAFU and Russian mercenary blogger Wargonzo reported fighting continued in Maximilianivka, with Wargonzo stating, quote, "The Ukrainian armed forces are well prepared, so a quick capture of the village is not to be expected." Fighting also continued in the Kostiantynivka area, with no significant changes to the situation. On the southern edge of the occupied city of Donetsk, a Russian training base was attacked by rockets fired by HIMARS, for the third time. Operational security? We don't need operational security. A video appeared on the internet shortly after the attack, showing up to 24 corpses of Russian trainees scattered across the area. In the Vuhledar area, the situation remains critical. The heaviest fighting continued to be at Pivdenno-Donbaska coal mine number 1 and number 3. Russian attempts to advance past the T-532 highway at Kostiantynivka in the direction of Katerynivka were unsuccessful. And to the southwest, Russian attacks east and south of Vuhledar were contained. Finally, here is today's Theaterwide update. The head of the main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Kyrylo Budanov, reported that Russia has made a, quote, massive increase in the production of Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles. Budanov didn't express major concern over North Korean-supplied KN-23 SRBMs, saying large-caliber ammunition was the bigger issue. President Zelensky reported that in the first half of September, Russia used over 640 Shahed-136 drones to attack Ukraine, which is close to an all-time record with 2 weeks still remaining. United States-based social media company Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, announced it was banning Russian propaganda channel RT and other Russian state media outlets across all platforms. In a press release, the company said, quote, "After careful consideration, we expanded our ongoing enforcement against Russian state media outlets. Россия сегодня, RT, and other related entities are now banned from our apps globally for foreign interference activity." The United States Justice Department is expected to release all of its evidence of Russian hybrid warfare across the globe, including releasing the names of up to 2,800 paid or influenced Russian propagandists from 81 countries, including more than 600 in the United States. Reportedly, the list includes elected officials in multiple countries. Documents from the Social Design Agency of Russia, headed by Ilya Gambashidze in Moscow, to mobilize Russian ideological troops, have been released, potentially exposing thousands of bot accounts and low-level disinformation operatives. The work of the Social Design Agency is allegedly directed by Sergei Kiriyenko, the first deputy chief of staff to autocrat Vladimir Putin. From 2022 to the start of 2024, the agency generated 33.9 million online comments, over 4,600 original videos, and 2,500 memes. Moscow also used the SDA to seed fake news stories into the press, with hundreds of fake reports picked up by large publications. Online investigators are already reviewing the instructions given to the useful idiots. The agents and real identities are already being revealed. Billionaire Elon Musk wasn't identified as an agent, but has retweeted Moscow-created disinformation, as has United States Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski said that not enough Ukrainian nationals have volunteered for the Ukrainian Legion of Poland, preventing training from starting. Quote, "We have done everything for a long time. Now we are waiting for Ukrainian conscripts or volunteers." Earlier, Sikorski had reported there was overwhelming interest, and there were thousands of applicants motivated by the promise of NATO alliance training and assurances of being provided with proper gear. The Wall Street Journal reported that an estimated 1 million soldiers have been killed or wounded since Russia expanded its war of aggression in February 2022. The story cited a leaked internal report from Kyiv, claiming 80,000 soldiers have been killed and another 400,000 wounded. The article estimated that 200,000 Russian soldiers had been killed and 400,000 wounded, which is close to the current number from Kyiv of 635,000 Russian casualties. During an interview with LBC Radio, outgoing NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said that a decision was reached, quote, "for the individual allies to make these decisions. in reference to authorizing Ukraine to use NATO alliance-provided weapons to strike Russia. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer warned that NATO needs to, quote, put Ukraine in the best possible position when asked about lifting restrictions on the use of Storm Shadow cruise missiles. US Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters that he didn't, quote, have any announcements to make about changes today when asked about the White House lifting weapon restrictions. The UK newspaper The Times reported that London would not do it alone and would only give the green light to use Storm Shadow missiles against Russia with the approval of the US. There is speculation that the authorization will come at the end of September, when President Zelensky is scheduled to address the United Nations General Assembly and meet with US President Joe Biden. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.